Here's a question that's been fueling some heated debates about the absolute universe. Is absolute Superman woke? Now, if you ask me, I always figured Superman was a commie, even before Red Son. You see these writers, they're obviously out to get Lex. In reality, he'd probably be the one out there saving us from this evil alien. But that's beside the point. And I'm joking. So how about it? Is the Man of Steel woke? Well, what does woke mean? Let's figure that out, then we can decide. But before that, don't forget, join us on Discord. Okay, so what does woke mean? It's a loaded term, gets thrown around a lot. People don't really seem to be thinking about it. This angry Irish kid realized if you threw it in the thumbnail of all your YouTube videos, you'd blow up. And this is me hopping on the bandwagon. Subscribe for more videos on how everything you've ever seen is woke. Don't get me wrong, I'm not making fun of conservatives or liberals. Just Superman and the Irish. No, not them either. This is a serious YouTube channel for serious conversations. All business, all the time. Business in the front, business in the back. All right, sorry. When I digress, I really digress. So back to the question at hand. Woke. It's a vague term. It doesn't lead to any kind of fruitful conversation. It's like when people say alt-right or fascism. They don't really know what it means. Basically, you're saying this sucks because it's liberal or because it's conservative. The other person, they don't really know why you're mad, but now they're mad too because they can tell you're insulting them. It's like when a French person is whispering nearby. You don't know what they're saying, but you know that it's rude. So woke, alt-right, far left, far right. They're all a bunch of provocative words that are good for getting YouTube views, but not much else. It's just a lazy way to say you don't like something. Be more specific. What do you mean by woke? Edward Fazer, a fellow comic book fan and my favorite living philosopher, has a pretty good definition. I still think it's just a tiny bit antagonistic, so I'm going to tone it down so it won't hurt anyone's feelings no matter how sensitive they are. Paraphrasing Fazer, wokeness is a hyper-egalitarian mindset that sees oppression and injustice where they do not exist or greatly exaggerates them where they do exist. But that's not what it's always meant. At first, it just meant being aware of social injustices and inequalities. I think we can all agree that's not what conservatives are talking about when they say it. If you really feel like the majority of people on the right are celebrating social injustices, then you've got problems that I'm not equipped to help you with. So it's not that they like inequality, they just feel like the writer is fabricating or exaggerating injustice in some way. But if you have a problem with a comic, whether you're a conservative who thinks it's woke or a liberal who thinks it's fill-in-the-blank phobic, rather than throw around these vague words that are just meant to be offensive, think about what you really mean. A skilled writer doesn't say, "This is great." They tell you what's great about it. If a judge on Food Network just said everything was delicious, they'd get fired. Be more descriptive. Don't say, "I can't eat that, I have a food allergy." Say, "If I eat that, I'll swell up like a balloon in a Thanksgiving parade." It's the same with the word woke. If there's something about a comic or a show or anything else you don't like, take the time to think about what it is you don't like about it. Then we can have a conversation about it, instead of screaming woke and fascist and groomer and alt-right. I think what really sets people off and what they usually mean when they say a comic is woke is they see it as a push for a political agenda. And some people say, superheroes were always woke. They've always fought against social injustice. But like we said earlier, that's not what people mean when they say a comic is woke. They're not talking about your standard social injustice. They're talking about, more these I guess they're thinking of these people who see an injustice hiding behind every tree. And when it comes to general usage, I think Fazer's definition may be too limited. Words change meanings. And at this point, it seems like woke doesn't even mean anything about social injustice. It just means basically pushing a political agenda that's liberal in a ham-fisted way, really forcing it. That's not to say that a story can't have a message. The good ones always do. The problem is when the story takes a backseat to politics, especially when characters are written unnaturally to serve as one-dimensional villains who represent the other side. When you're just setting up these caricatures of people you disagree with and then having your superhero come and knock them down, it's essentially a straw man argument disguised as storytelling. And I can see how people on either side of an issue wouldn't like to have their views misrepresented that way. So with that context in mind, what is it about Absolute Superman that's sparking all these angry Irish YouTube videos? I think there's three major elements. I don't mean major elements of the story, although I guess maybe they are major elements. But I mean, these are the three big things that people are not loving. First, you got Jor-El, Superman's dad, punished for speaking out against Krypton's environmental destruction and how they're being reckless with the environment. And that seems to draw some direct parallels to today's climate change debates. That's always been, there's always been that environmental element to Superman leaving. It's not that it's new, but people are definitely going to see some parallels there. And also Lara is punished for criticizing the lack of funding for interstellar travel. So maybe Elon Musk can cut her a check. Some might argue that in today's society, it's usually those who question environmentalist viewpoints who face criticism or backlash rather than those who advocate for environmental protection. So that, I think, that's questionable. What's the point there? I guess on the one hand, I think that this whole scientific element of Krypton where everything is run by science and they seem to have pushed science to its ultimate, they want to always push the boundaries without really any regards to ethics. I think that's an interesting thought. And I think that that's something that potentially conservatives could even get behind, but I'm not sure if it's going to come off that way, to most people. Next, Absolute Superman is a hero whose parents struggled as members of Krypton's downtrodden labor guild. Then on Earth, he continues that fight by standing up for exploited workers. So themes of class struggle and corporate greed are central to this Superman's mission. He's going around helping people. They talk about he's done it on, this isn't the first time he's done that. He's kind of he's on a mission. And depending on the depth and complexity of how they're depicting the people on each side, those themes, they could maybe provide a meaningful exploration of societal issues, or they could come across as oversimplified and agenda-driven. I feel like these kind of end up a little bit more on the agenda-driven side. It's hard to say, because they are comic books, so what are you going to do? But they're just it's just this evil corporation, evil in a way that I don't think real corporations are in general. I don't think that the statement that you would be making about Lazarus Corp is one that you could make about American corporations at large. At one point, you got Superman and he's complaining that the mining company paid its miners a month's wage, about $300, to convince them to enter an asbestos-filled mine. And he talks about how they made like $200 billion the year before or something like that. The argument being that he should have paid him more. Now, I'm not an economist, but I think there's more to it than that. Now, Superman, though, he grew up hard. He didn't have an education. He didn't learn about economics, macro or micro. So maybe he just doesn't know. And maybe he'll meet a wise Milton Friedman, Thomas Sowell kind of composite character who can set him on the right path. Regardless, this whole evil company making miners work in a hazardous condition, it's hard for me to believe that any real company would do that, or at least that many would do that. I think we've got pretty good protections in place in general. But it's also hard for me to believe that Lex Luthor wouldn't make friends with Superman. They seemed like they were just so close sometimes. So close to mending fences. Finally, Kal-El's story's always been about an outsider finding a home on Earth. But in Absolute Superman, it sounds like the immigrant narrative is going to take center stage. On the Comic Book Couples Counseling podcast, Jason Aaron said, if I'm telling the story of an immigrant coming to this country in 2024, it's a bit different than the idealized version. So I think we can all see where he's going with that. And I don't know though, is it fair to he has not done any, I don't think that if you look at the comic, That's really where that hasn't happened yet. He hasn't written anything about that yet in issue 1. So I don't know. I mean, if it appears to advocate for a particular stance without considering alternative perspectives and the complexities of the issues, that Irish kid, he's probably going to make some more angry videos. But it's too early to tell how Aaron is going to handle it. Based on his past things that he's done, people are going to already kind of have a feeling of how it's going to go. So they're probably going to go ahead and jump on that early. But in general, I don't know, I like to give people a chance. Who knows? Maybe he watched an episode of Greg Gutfield or something, and maybe it changed his whole outlook on life. So to get to the bottom of it, is Absolute Superman really woke? And does it matter? I would say it's woke-ish. On the one hand, it's not like necessarily one of these. I think a lot of times when people talk about things being woke, they're really thinking more along the lines of like diversity, equality, inclusion initiative type things. And I'm not sure how deep this is going to go in there. To me, this seems more like it's maybe just going to promote the usual liberal talking points. I mean, it definitely seems like Aaron is setting the table to make some political statements. But if he doesn't let his political ideology get in the way of good writing, that might be okay. I generally will read these comics unless it's like, if I'm enjoying it, if it's a good story, they've got to really, I guess I'm going to give them some leeway is what I'm saying. But if you're saying that even if it's fair, or maybe not fair, but like, let's say somewhat even-handed, I mean, what? If we're saying that's woke, if we're saying anything liberal is woke, then what's the point of having the word woke in the first place? Can't we just say liberal? I think that's maybe really what you would say probably about Absolute Superman. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's somewhat going to be the driver of the whole Absolute universe. It makes sense with the oppression that is supposed to come with the dark side energy. It makes sense with the, Bruce Wayne isn't a billionaire. The Joker is a billionaire. But at the same time, I mean, a guy like Scott Snyder, I think he's generally been a guy who's, whether you think he succeeds or not, he focuses on entertaining people and writing a good story. I think that if he was going to be somebody who was going to really be trying to push a message down your throat, that shooting in Absolute Batman #1 wouldn't have happened in a zoo. You know where it would have happened. I don't want to say it. I don't know if YouTube like censors your videos or something, but it wouldn't happen in a zoo. You know, if he wanted to make a point right now. So let's see what happens. This story, it's undeniable that it's emphasizing themes of social justice. There's going to be statements on class, inequality, and environmentalism. Based on Aaron's interviews, it sounds like he's going to get into immigration. I don't know if that's enough to call it woke. I think it's enough to have problems with it, but say what your problems are. Use your words, as I would say to, well, really anybody, but certainly a small child. So this is Absolute Universe. And one thing we've got to remember, as I mentioned, it's supposed to be an oppressive, hopeless universe. And in a universe like that, it makes sense for the power structures to be corrupt. And as I've mentioned in another video, I'm more than happy to interpret these comics however I need to avoid the poor writing habits of the writers. Now, I'll say, even in alternate universes, stories can still reflect and exaggerate real-world issues. There's one panel in Absolute Superman #1 where Saul, Superman's sentient suit, says, "Kal-El, this is a planet of combustible engines, fanatical religions, and thermonuclear weapons. These people are never safe." Come on. Like, surely an artificially intelligent suit would be smart enough not to make a lame dig like that. And you can tell he thought he was being pretty funny. Nice try. Nice try, Saul. In my opinion, the jury is still out on whether Absolute Superman is woke, if you care to hear the jury's verdict. Well, actually, no, that's not fair to you. I should render a verdict. For me to certify this story as woke, I will need to see more clear allusions to our reality. The CEO of the Lazarus Corporation will need to own a social media company, an electric car manufacturer, a bunch of rocket ships. The president will need to be Lex Luthor with a blonde wig. Until then, I'm going to say not woke, but definitely pushing an agenda, and we will see whether or not it is handled artfully. But that's just my opinion. And like I said, I always thought Superman was just biding his time until he could take over the world to enforce his evil progressive agenda anyway. I'm kidding. Just kidding. But what do you think? Is Absolute Superman woke? And this is just you and me talking. You're not posting a YouTube video about it. These comments aren't YouTube thumbnails, so we don't have to say it's woke if we don't think it's woke. We can just say it's progressive or it's, I don't know. Let's get specific. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed the video, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and we'll talk more about this stuff. And if you don't like talking about this, what do you want to talk about? You tell me. I'm here. I've got a camera. I've got a microphone. I've got a voice. I've got just enough time to talk about just about anything.